From the video store on the ocean floor, it's Dread Diver Radio. Let's take a little obsessive cinematic journey, beginning with one of my favorite PG-13 movies of all time. From 1987, The Monster Squad.
You know who to call when you have ghosts. But who do you call when you have monsters?
We're the Monster Squad.
I think it's fair to say that this movie is well loved inside of horror fan circles. They even made a documentary about the ardent fandom of this film called Wolfman's Got Nards back in 2018.
The first time I ever saw Monster Squad,
I was at a sleepover party with a friend of mine. It was on HBO.
Every time we go to the video store, that's what I'd rent.
I even had a bootleg DVD. The word got out. Everything we had seen up till then had all been kid stuff, and this was the first taste of something dangerous.
If you haven't seen it, you should. Especially if you're a fan of the Universal monster films. The movie concerns a group of 12-year-olds who form a monster fan club called Monster Squad and have to attempt to save their hometown from Count Dracula and a group of classic monsters when they show up in their town for real. It's endlessly quotable and rewatchable, and features a great cast of child actors that ground the film in a way that many films never achieve. Andre Gower plays Sean, the de facto leader of the squad who is a monster-obsessed kid dealing with a bit of a rocky home life. His parents are always fighting. His dad was played by Stephen Mocht, who worked playing a lot of characters in TV and movies before being cast in Monster Squad. I'll just pick one at random. Sergeant Thor in Galaxina. I think we have a clip.
But I think I'm starting to fall in love with you. I know that sounds crazy. After all, you're a machine and I'm a human being. Which is just another kind of machine, really.
Fun. Anyway, Sean's mom was played by Mary Ellen Trainor, who you might not know by name, but if you're a fan of 80s movies, you've definitely seen her. Let's go down the list. Romancing the Stone, The Goonies, Lethal Weapon 1, actually all the Lethal Weapon movies, Die Hard, Scrooged, Ghostbusters 2, and that's just a few of them. Quite a list. One thing many of these movies have in common is that they were directed or produced by Richard Donner. But she's even more associated with her ex-husband Robert Zemeckis. The two met when Trainor was working as a production assistant on the Steven Spielberg film 1941, which Zemeckis co-wrote. Zemeckis wasn't necessarily known for working in the horror genre, but he and Mary Ellen did collaborate on a fairly well-loved episode of the HBO show Tales from the Crypt, The Creepy Christmas Tale, and All Through the House.
Police and sheriff's departments in the Gaines County area have issued an all-points bulletin this evening for a male Caucasian reported to have brutally murdered 4 women in the Pleasantville area. County authorities say that the man, a patient at the Pleasantville Institute for the Criminally Insane, escaped earlier this evening and should be considered extremely dangerous.
The story was adapted from the February 1954 issue of The Vault of Horror, one of the horror comic book titles published by EC Comics, which served as inspiration for the Tales from the Crypt TV show. One of the co-writers was none other than Monster Squad director Fred Dekker. But this wasn't the first time the story about an escaped mental patient tormenting a household was adapted for the screen. And All Through the House was the opening segment of Tales from the Crypt, the 1972 Amicus Productions adaptation of the stories from 50s-era EC Comics. Joan Collins plays a wife who kills her husband, cleaning up the crime scene to the tune of traditional carols like Once in Royal David City and Away in a Manger. Director Freddie Francis creates a pretty chilling atmosphere. The segment is both tense and darkly humorous, making it the most iconic and effective of the film's anthology.
We interrupt this program for a special announcement. A man described as a homicidal maniac has escaped from the hospital for the criminally insane. He is 6'3" tall, 210 pounds, dark eyes, bald, and may be wearing a Santa Claus costume taken from a shop in Bern.
Francis was a renowned British cinematographer and director whose career spanned over 60 years. He gained acclaim for his work on films like Room at the Top in 1959, The Innocents from '61, The Elephant Man in 1980, and he earned 2 Academy Awards and 5 BAFTA Awards. Francis worked with directors like Jack Clayton, John Huston, and of course David Lynch, and iconic horror films, including Paranoiac, The Evil of Frankenstein, and the aforementioned Tales from the Crypt. His work in the 1980s and 90s, notably on Lynch's Dune in '84 and Cape Fear with Martin Scorsese in '91, solidified his reputation as one of the best cinematographers of his time. Of course, he worked with Scorsese on Cape Fear, who up until that point had not yet made a straightforward thriller. The film is an adaptation of a 1962 film of the same name, starring Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum. That film was directed by J. Lee Thompson, an English filmmaker who became known as a versatile and prolific director of thrillers and action-adventure films. His credits include The Guns of the Navarone, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and also 10 to Midnight with Charles Bronson, just to name a few. In the early 80s, he even took a stab at making a slasher movie. Get it? Terrible. Anyway, he helmed a movie that many early slasher fans remember called Happy Birthday to Me. Remember that one?
Because of the bizarre nature of this birthday party, no one will be seated during the last 10 minutes of Happy Birthday to Me. Pray you're not invited.
If you were around back then, you might remember the movie poster for this one, which featured a terrified teenager about to meet his demise at the end of a loaded shish kebab skewer. The tagline says, "John will never eat shish kebab again." And he never did. The movie starred young actress Melissa Sue Anderson, who was eager to break out of her best-known role as the wholesome Mary Ingalls in the long-running TV show Little House on the Prairie. Her co-star, Michael Landon, was mostly known for wholesome roles himself. The hard-working father, Charles Ingalls, on Little House, Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, and actual angel Jonathan Smith on the show Highway to Heaven. But early in his career, he got a gig starring as Tony Rivers in the Sam Arkoff-produced drive-in flick, I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Sam Arkoff, while working along with Roger Corman under American International Pictures in the 1950s, is credited with starting a few new film subgenres, including beach party movies and outlaw biker pictures. He remained consistently connected to the horror genre, however, and throughout the 60s and 70s is credited as executive producer on several B-movie classics, including The Pit and the Pendulum, X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, Blackula, Madhouse, and The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
He wore a white hood and was known only as the Phantom Killer. The Town That Dreaded Sundown, a true story.
That film, originally released in 1976, was given an update in 2014 with a part remake, part sequel, part meta reboot produced by Ryan Murphy and Jason Blum. When Blum was asked in an interview why he wanted to remake the original film, he responded, "Ryan Murphy found the movie, brought it to me, and said, I want to do it. I think he's an amazing creative force, especially with horror. Murphy has often been described as the most powerful man in modern television and signed the largest development deal in TV history, valued at $300 million, with Netflix in 2018. Among the projects he worked on for Netflix was Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story in 2022. It became one of the most watched Netflix series of all time. The show focused on the life of Jeffrey Dahmer and how he became one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. It starred Evan Peters as Dahmer Richard Jenkins as his father Lionel, and Penelope Ann Miller as his mother Joyce. Miller began acting in the mid-'80s, first on Broadway and then moving to the big screen in films like Adventures in Babysitting and Big Top Pee-wee. She broke out big in the early 90s, co-starring with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams in Awakenings, and alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop, playing a teacher hiding with her son Dominic from her criminal drug-dealing husband Cullen Crisp, played by Richard Tyson. Remember Richard Tyson? Sure you do. He's probably best known for the role of the bully Buddy Revell in the criminally underseen high school classic 3 O'Clock High from 1987. The next year, he went from high school to softcore cable smut, starring in Zalman King's Two Moon Junction. His love interest was played by none other than Sherilyn Fenn. This was 2 years before she would play a high schooler herself in David Lynch's cultishly adored TV series, Twin Peaks. How'd we get back to David Lynch? Anyway, she was 24 when they shot the first season, only 6 years younger than Kyle MacLachlan, who played FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper on the show. Other co-stars on Twin Peaks included Everett McGill as Big Ed Hurley and Wendy Roby, Ed's eccentric eye-patch-wearing wife Nadine. The pair would go on to star as a twisted couple in Wes Craven's idiosyncratic horror fable The People Under the Stairs in '91. They were cast because Craven was highly impressed by their performances as the married couple on Lynch's TV show. He wanted to leverage the intense, somewhat off-kilter chemistry the duo displayed as Big Ed and Nadine. He believed they were perfect for the sinister roles of Mommy and Dad. Roby would go on to portray quirky characters in a number of low-budget horror offerings, including Craven's Vampire in Brooklyn, The Dentist 2, Devil in the Flesh with Rose McGowan, and The Attic Expeditions as Dr. Thelema in 2001. In that film, she co-starred with horror fan favorites Alice Cooper, Ted Raimi, Jeffrey Combs, Andrus Jones, and a 27-year-old Seth Green. Green started acting at the age of 7, playing small roles on television before making his big screen debut in Woody Allen's Radio Days in 1987. Around that time, he was auditioning for every kid's role in Hollywood, including doing a screen test for a role in an upcoming theatrical take on the classic Universal monsters directed by a guy named Fred Dekker. You guessed it, RoboCop 3. Or, I mean Monster Squad. He even read with Andre Gower and the two became good friends. Neato. We did it again. Monster Squad, to Tales from the Crypt, to The Town That Dreaded Sundown, to Twin Peaks, and back to Monster Squad, with a whole bunch of shit in between. Aren't horror movies fun? Speaking of which, let's move on to horror headlines.
Forgive me, I have to do an ad read. You want to go down to 38th and Federal, Francine's Rug Outlet. They've got every style rug you can think of. Blue, brown, I mean all of them. And if you mention my name, you get 10% off on Scotch guarding. And what that does is it's a process they do to the rug. It protects your rug from Scotch. And I don't know, that could be important for you depending on what kind of parties you throw or whatever. But anyway, Francine's Rug Outlet. Tell them I sent you.
This from Dread Central. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre gets TV series greenlit from A24 and Long Walk writer. New movie also happening. Okay, well, let me just start off by saying I love The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and part 2 for that matter. I know they're very different, and some people come down on one side or the other, on part 2 especially, but a television series coming from J.T. Malner, who's set to lead the project, and Glenn Powell as executive producer, along with Dan Cohen and some others. I know some people are cheering for this. They're thinking, oh, A24's involved, so it's going to be elevated somehow. I find this kind of odd, to be honest with you. And part of the reason is this whole buying up old slasher properties and remaking them. I already lived through this with Platinum Dunes in the early 2000s. All of these movies already got reboots and remakes, and some, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, got several where they spawned sequels off of the remakes and, so forth. I feel like it's a little played out, people. And this is someone who liked the first Texas Chainsaw remake. But how many times are we going to do this? And A24 really, to me, seems like they tried to enter into the entertainment landscape by bringing quirky, interesting kind of films, even though a lot of them I didn't really like that much. They sort of created their own brand. And now it seems like with this and the Friday the 13th TV show, it's just Platinum Dunes 2.0. And Platinum Dunes 1.0 wasn't really all that great. Starting to feel like a cash grab. And sure, I'll watch it. A lot of people are going to tune in and watch it. And I hope I'm surprised and it's better than I kind of expect. But the further we get away from the original movies, the more the charm and the magic of those films from that era wears off a bit, I think. I mean, part of what everyone loves about Texas Chainsaw is the look and the feel of it. We're a million miles away from that now. And what story is there to tell, really? I feel like with the Jason series, I am kind of interested in what they're going to do with Pamela and the backstory and all that stuff. They haven't ever really gotten into it in any of the sequels or subsequent, remakes or whatever. They've touched on it here or there, but I do believe there could be a story there to tell. But the franchise of Texas Chainsaw has delved into the backstory of, the family and Leatherface and there's contradicting, storylines that come from different sequels and things. And it's just a big old mess. In fact, I'm currently working on a timeline video to point out what a mess it actually is. So I get the idea of do a show and maybe that shores up the lore and the backstory of these characters. But I don't know that I need that. I mean, part of what made the original work so well is that they were just a force that these characters had to go up against. Learning too much about them really doesn't add anything in my mind. So let's see what else this article has to say. So the article claims that Kim Henkel is involved. And he was one of the folks behind the original 74 film. He's getting a producer credit. Here's something you need to know about Hollywood if you don't already. Sometimes that doesn't mean anything. It means something to the person who gets the credit because that usually is attached to some kind of money coming in. But depending on where the rights sit and other things, it could be pretty much ceremonial. Who knows if he actually has any input to the show or the subsequent remake movie or whatever. It says the team is developing a new feature film separately that JT Molnar is not involved in. And the press release really doesn't go into detail about what that's going to be, whether it's a remake or a sequel or a reboot or what. According to this article, Molnar has emphasized that his focus is not on remaking the original film, which he considers untouchable, but on using the long-form television format to explore the world and mythology surrounding it in a way that respects its legacy while expanding the lore. Okay, well, that's fine, and I understand where he's coming from, but that's what everybody says when they jump into something like this. So it really doesn't say much to me. It all comes down to, do they make a good, entertaining show or not? And I'll try to give it the benefit of the doubt, but you might sense my skepticism. Anyway, let's keep our fingers crossed for this one. I always try to go into these things with a positive attitude, even though it might not sound like it. I would love for it to succeed and stand on its own legs as an interesting piece of entertainment, but remains to be seen. And I guess we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed and see what manifests. That'll do it for this episode. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Dread Diver out.